When I first started buying games for my now very old Xbox 360, I neglected to replay a majority of the games that I already owned. The biggest reason for this is the only games that I owned were every available Halo game, including Halo 2 on PC and Far Cry 3. I have good memories of the Halo games, and I don't particularly want to go back and tarnish my opinions of them. I like being able to remember Halo 4 multiplayer as very good despite knowing that it probably doesn't hold up. What little gameplay I have seen of this series since I last played them doesn't do much to entice me to attempt a replay. The exception to this is Halo 3 ODST. What I remember most vividly about ODST is the atmosphere. The film noir style with its darker visuals and jazzy soundtrack were ultimately what made me want to return to the game. Its subversion of the Halo norms is by far the best aspect, even if it does sometimes fall back into the safety of the formula. Halo 3 ODST has the smallest scale of any of the Halo games, and I really like the way this focused on the storytelling, or at least tried to. It impacted the game in a variety of ways that I overall enjoyed a lot, and focusing on the silent protagonist's journey through a broken city is easily the best decision for the overall experience of ODST. A heavier focus on this, and perhaps an altered version of the story to help this, would have made the game infinitely more interesting and consistent. In its current state, the rookie's role in the game definitely assists the pacing and overall feel of the game very well, because of the contrast between levels that take place at night and during the day. The daytime levels of the game are much more hectic and chaotic, and it was an appreciated breath of fresh air into the gameplay and the storytelling. The opening of the game takes place at night, with the rookie trapped in his drop pod, in the aftermath of the combat that took place during the day, which is immediately noticeable due to the design of New Mombasa, but I'll talk about that later. The opening mission of the game fosters a great sense of intrigue into what occurred during the day and how the city came to be so derelict. However, the contrast between the two different level types, day and night, is where I think the game could have most improved. The story of the game, in my opinion, lacks direction for a large majority. Up until the last quarter of ODST, it's not obvious what the goal is. For the opening, a lack of direction is okay, but it should be established pretty soon after this point. The rookie's goal is very straightforward: find out what happened to the rest of his team. The rest of the team's goal seems to be get out of the city, but it's rarely mentioned outside of brief dialogue during gameplay or cutscenes. It's obvious that at some point the rookie will meet up with his team, but this leads to some corners being cut in other areas of the story, such as contradicting motivations and backflips on sensible decisions. All of this is done in the name of an exciting finale, which was to me fairly lackluster. The story insisted that there be some noble and uplifting ending to the game that involved a big firefight and a vehicle section, which I didn't really appreciate or think of as a fitting conclusion. I believe the game would have been more engaging had the rookie had to fight his way out of a city after being completely abandoned, along the way discovering the fate of his team. This way, there is purpose attached to the daytime missions and an extra sense of loneliness and isolation attached to the nighttime missions, the lack of which are my biggest issues with the storytelling of the game. What starts as a story that seems to revolve around discovering the remnants of a lost battle in total isolation quickly becomes a rescue story about noble heroes who have been established as unable to do many of the things they end up doing. Part of the scale down in ODST is the lack of Spartans. The game's focus on slightly more ordinary soldiers was a refreshing perspective to take. The Master Chief's stories warranted more grand and epic finales because of his superhuman abilities. The ODSTs, on the other hand, are simply specially trained soldiers. Towards the end of the game, I think the ODSTs become more like Spartans, and this was kind of annoying. A majority of the missions in ODST involve mostly realistic combat situations. The rookie takes on small teams of low-level Covenant, and the rest of his team participate in large-scale battles with other UNSC soldiers. The end game, however, involves Rookie and Buck taking on armies of Covenant essentially by themselves. The ODSTs become Spartans to make the finale more exciting, and it was disappointing to see this. The fact that the Covenant invades a civilian city with a massive army is part of why I think the story would be better served and more realistic and interesting if it were about ordinary soldiers that were way out of their depth in a losing battle. The characterization throughout the game is fairly weak as well, and it was hard to be invested in the conflicts of anyone besides the rookie. The personalities of playable ODSTs are generic, and their cockiness made combat feel uninspired and easy to beat. A better exploration of their characters could have come from their inability to control the situation, which is very clearly something they're not used to. Being on top of everything all the time, or at the very least acting like it, leads to situations that should be very tense being overall quite boring and not challenging. The rookie is easy to invest in because of his nature as the silent protagonist. It is very easy to place yourself in his shoes as the player after witnessing the events during the day. The contemplative walks through the now wrecked New Mombasa help foster a feeling of empathy with the rookie's character that is missing with the rest of his team. And the now wrecked New Mombasa is by far the best aspect of ODST's experience. The overall aesthetic and atmosphere of the game is, as I said before, what enticed me to play again, and it definitely didn't disappoint. This is yet another area of the game where the contrast between night and day is highlighted. Walking through the streets as the rookie is intriguing. The city is filled with abandoned vehicles, debris, weapons, ammo, all that kind of thing, and you can't help but wonder how it all happened. It's aided very well by the lighting of the city as well. During the day, the slowly fading sunlight casts dramatic shadows across the city, and at night the lights still work to create a great sense of unease and isolation. The night sections in particular have some incredible music to play alongside already great visuals. The jazz that plays while you control the rookie is very similar to Blade Runner's score, but with different instruments. The saxophones are soft, and the violins and pianos are somber and mellow, and it's music that I listen to even after finishing the game. During the daylight, the score is slightly underwhelming, but it provides the excitement necessary for those sections of the game where it is used. The aspect of the day missions that could have been improved most is the gameplay. The combat works very well with the context of the night sections, but I think it could have been more kinetic and hectic during the day, which could have been another aspect of contrast between the two parts of the game. The rookie's combat is fairly slow paced, but there aren't that many Covenant around, so it does make sense. In some ways, it's slightly more stealth-based, but overall what it does is break up the walking around so it doesn't feel as boring, and it does a great job of this. The rest of the ODSTs, however, don't have this same context. They are fighting armies, but it still feels as slow as the rookie's combat, which impacted how exciting these sections of the game were. Vehicle combat and a few of the shooting galleries were highlights, but they are, in the grand scheme of things, fairly insignificant, and don't really do a lot to relieve the boredom of the rest of the day's battles. Despite this, the game still plays very smoothly, weapons are satisfying to use, and the enemies are balanced and fun to fight. What I think works best about the gameplay is the massive variety of weapons. Although the movement or abilities of our characters are no different to each other, the sheer number of weapons available to the player allows for a number of different playstyles. The fact that the Covenant weapons reduce shields better works well with the fact that human weapons do more damage to unshielded enemies. The number of combinations allows for a new interpretation of combat throughout the game, and I really enjoyed finding new weapons, especially in the rookies missions, because it meant I could mix things up a little. If you own an Xbox 360, I would definitely recommend picking ODST up. It'll be cheap, and for a few hours of fun, it's definitely worth it. It's certainly been good to play a Halo game and not want to tear it to shreds.
Halo 3 ODST gets a 7 out of 10. A very proud 7, a good 7, a solid 7.